Okay, our next podcast, this podcast is going to go into looking at the major environments on the Earth. We call these the biomes. Before I do this, I do want to mention we left off last time talking about the circulation of air masses and that precipitation can move through these air masses as well. I do want to mention that also pollution can get into these air masses, and that can have a major effect on these biomes. Um, so pollution can be anything from toxic compounds that we generate um, through factory and industrialization processes, but it can also be non-toxic compounds that have um, other kinds of problems. And some of that would be CO2, carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide by itself is not a toxic compound. We breathe it out. Plants need it, so it's a very non-toxic compound. But when there's a lot of it in the atmosphere, it tends to trap heat, and so that's a theory that the environmentalists have worked with and developed about the heat being trapped on the earth by this carbon dioxide creates kind of a greenhouse effect, and which is contributes to the theory of global warming, so that the earth is increasing in temperature. Now there is differences of opinions even in the environmental community about how severe this is, and how big of a problem, and how much the carbon dioxide is really affecting that. Now, we do know carbon dioxide has heat retaining properties. They can be studied in a lab, and you can see that. But on a global scale, where we're talking about a large undefined space in the atmosphere, um, there's not direct observation of it, but it is a theory about how heat can be trapped in the earth, and that is carbon dioxide up there can trap it. We have a ozone layer up there, which kind of prevents too much radiation from getting down onto the earth, and so also another theory about problems with this is that some of the toxic compounds we have released into the atmosphere are breaking down some of that ozone, which is O3. And so that could cause a problem of allowing too much radiation to reach the earth. So those are some of the different concerns and issues when looking at um, our human effect on the globe, but also from a global perspective or global scale. That's some of the issues that are addressed by environmentalists. All right, so now we want to look at the different biomes on the earth. All right, so this map right here kind of shows you all of them, and it just lays out kind of where they are by this color code here. And it makes it look like there's really these real clear, distinct boundaries where you could see a dotted line out on somewhere where you'd cross over and be in one and not, or halfway in one, half in the other. And really, this is like an idealized map. Um, Oftentimes these types of environmental conditions of these biomes kind of blend together, and it's not as clear cut as this shows, um, but it's a good generalized idealized map of the major biomes. So these are the terrestrial. We're going to look at some the aquatic also. In the terrestrial, we have like our tropical rainforest. Now, in our outline, what we do is we list each one of these. We list the major characteristics. What defines a biome is things like, oh, sorry about that. Things like its temperature, and the what's found there, how much rainfall it gets, what's found there, like what type of plants, and then also what type of animals. So those are the main things that classify these different biomes. So like the first one, for instance, in our outline is the tropical rainforest. So here in this diagram, we got the green, tropical rainforest. If you notice the dark green, if you noticed, all those are pretty close to the equator here. You need a lot of solar radiation for the plant growth, uh, and um, and then also they're pretty close to the oceans as well. So you need a lot of rainfall that's going to be picked up from those air masses. So what your book does is looks at each one. Here it is, and it has an insert there that just has where that particular biome is located. All right, so the tropical rainforest is it's probably the most diverse and productive habitat on the earth. There's certainly some that are right there with it. The marsh, the um, coastal marshlands are very productive ecosystems as well. Coral reefs. So there's a couple others that compete with it, but often these get the disclaimer of being the most productive place on earth. So um, that's the tropical rainforest. The next one are the savannas. These are grasslands. They're dry and warm and just have grasses and some short trees. So no forest areas in the savannas. The next one is the deserts. And what's wrong with that image there? But the deserts are certainly dry regions, little to no rainfall for most of them, high temperatures, and as these increase, that process we refer to as desertification. So sometimes the deserts can increase if certain conditions are such that the outlying area starts becoming more and more like these conditions. Then that's an increase. If we clear cut areas, then that can contribute to that if it's close to the desert, and it then becomes classified as that. Next, we have temperate grasslands. These we have here in North America. We sometimes call these prairies here, but the grasslands they're wetter than deserts, but they're drier than forests. So kind of in between with the amount of rain. Basically, just treeless regions. These areas have been used very heavily for agricultural applications in America. All right. Next is a chaparral. Chaparrals are these shrub areas. There's these small shrub-like trees and bushes and things like that. Usually rocky areas, dry, hot summers, uh, but no tall trees are located there. All right. Next, we have the coniferous forest. Coniferous forest would be dominated by conifer trees. Now, we have a lot of conifer trees here, pine trees, but also in the coniferous forest, we have cold winters. So generally, these are associated with conifer trees dominating. So we also have a lot of deciduous trees here, but dominating, and then also cold regions. So up in Canada and the northern areas, usually considered coniferous forest. And then ours is the deciduous forest, is generally where our area is located. The temperate forest or deciduous forest, deciduous trees dominate here. Trees that drop their leaves in the fall and winter, and then one last one for the terrestrial is the tundra. Tundras are dominated by treeless regions. It's so cold here that there is really no trees that grow here. They have extreme cold areas. The soil freezes, and that frozen soil is called permafrost. And so not too much can grow there. Some grasses and lichens and things like that can dominate, but cold winters. All right, so that's all the terrestrial biomes. The next we also look at the aquatic biomes, and so in the aquatic biomes, we have a variation of those as well. Okay, the basically we can say the oceans dominate the Earth's surface. About 70% of the Earth's surface is water. So we have these aquatic habitats or biomes. We have freshwater and saltwater. In the freshwater biomes, um, we have moving bodies of water. This is going to include our rivers and streams. We have different types of lakes. We have shallow lakes, which are usually more productive because plants can grow better in shallow lakes and marshes and stuff. And then we have deep lakes, which are called oligotrophic, and usually less nutrients are found in those. Um, so those are our major freshwater biomes. We also have estuaries. They can kind of be counted as either freshwater or marine. This is really where the rivers run into the oceans. And in the estuaries, we have a mixing. So it's kind of a combination of fresh and salt. And that's going to be our marsh areas and very productive areas are these. A lot of juveniles spend their grounds here. Their early life here in these grounds, and so it's sometimes called a nursery of the ocean. So juveniles will come in there; they're more protected in there in the estuary if they can survive in that kind of brackish water. All right, so that's the fresh water. We can also look at different regions of the water. So in this we have what's called a photic zone. This is up near the top. And this is okay. So here we're looking at the in the ocean here. Um, we can also use some of these terms applying to freshwater as well. Like the photic is just the top part of the water column where the sunlight penetrates. The aphotic's down below where it does not penetrate. And so we could apply those terms to fresh or salt water. But this is salt water here. So in the oceans, this is the ocean here. So in the ocean, we have some different zones that we can distinguish in this, different habitats within the ocean. We list these out, these marine biomes. We have the intertidal zone, that's right here. That's the area where tides come in and out. So it's above ground portion of the time and below, it's above water portion of the time and below water. So that's the tide coming in and out. All right, so that's the intertidal zone. That can be a rocky or sandy shore depending on where it's located, but that's a very transitional type habitat. We have the coral reefs, not shown on here, but the coral reefs are a very productive area of the ocean. So this is dominated by these corals, which make leave these skeleton shells behind that kind of leave this scaffolding that provides a lot of protection for animals that live around those. We have the benthos, which is the bottom. They refer to this as the benthic ram, or the benthos is the bottom of the ocean, all the way from the edge of the continental shelf down, and that's called a lot of unique animals live on the benthos. We have the neritic zone is the area, it's not labeled on here, but the neritic zone is this zone right here. And it is the area, most productive area of the ocean. It's from the intertidal zone to the edge of the continental shelf. That's the neritic zone. And then the oceanic zone is this zone right out here. But actually more life is found here than there. All right, so that's the major zones. There's an example of our coral reef there. That's the major zones of the Earth, terrestrial, and then our two different types of aquatic biomes is the term we use for these different habitats. All right, so that ends that podcast. We have our next podcast is going to go into looking at behavioral biology, which is studying the behavior of the animals in these ecosystems.